Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part there of the, 19th of June 2024. Sorry, this would have been earlier, but I got sucked into watching a Mick Lynch interview on Novara Media that was fascinating. Anyway, right, let's go to start with what is, I think, really good news. We heard yesterday that Canada, Defence Minister Bill Blair said that they're not ready to send training troops or personnel, Canadian personnel, into Ukraine. So I guess a number of nations have been contacted for this coalition of trainers. Estonia have now come out, Kaja Kallas, very clear here. This is not a red line for us. Estonia is ready to talk about sending Estonian troops to Ukraine. So that's fantastic news, really strong there from Estonia. German aid to Ukraine has a piece on these RCH 155 mil howitzers. So these are what are going to be used by the UK, actually. They're replacing our AS-90 going forward. There are a number that have been pledged to Ukraine to be built over the coming years and sent to Ukraine by Germany. Interesting detail announced in a press release published today by KNDS. Ukraine will apparently receive 54 RCH 155s, whereas so far only 36 were known to have been financed by Germany. 18 and 18 announced on the 9th, September 22 and February 2024. My strong guess is on the financier of the remaining 18 is also Germany. Germany's Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius announced a new €500 million package in Odessa a few weeks ago. As part of the package, he also mentioned that Germany will deliver 18 wheeled howitzers to Ukraine in 2025. I, just like everyone else, I guess, assumed that he was referring to the first contract Germany had financed for Ukraine, as these 18 RCH 155s are to be delivered from 2025. During a visit of the Ukrainian President Zelensky to Germany, however, he emphasized once again that these wheeled howitzers are part of a new package. Now, together with the press release published today, this is yesterday, it is slowly dawning on me that this might actually have been a new announcement and that Germany is actually financing 18 additional RCH 155s, 54 in total for Ukraine. If so, it was not a double announcement by Pistorius, but just a mix-up of the delivery date of the RCH 155 from the first contract and a new announcement of the third contract. I just want to mention that these newly announced RCH 155s can't be delivered in 2025, as the first contract only starts there, and the delivery of the RCH 155s from the second contract will be ongoing until 2027. That being said, I would like to see further confirmation by either KNDS or the German government, as this is just my best guess. In any case, great news for Ukraine. Right. He then says, FYI, and this is great because actually he's got to a point now, German aid to Ukraine, where he's trying to get his press pass so that you can get access to more information. He's actually got the German ambassador replying to him on his thread. FYI, the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany actually just confirmed my assessment. Very kind of you. He says to Alexei Makaev, Germany is indeed financing another 18 RCH 155 for Ukraine, meaning Pistorius actually announced a third batch in Odessa. So I don't know when the timing of that is, but really great because these are new. These are eventually will be able to be controlled remotely. That's what I think, remote controlled howitzers. That's why they're called RCH. It's not their ability as it stands, but that's where I guess tech is going. Just as Jakub Janovsky from Oryx has said, right, I've updated the answering the call heavy weaponry supply to Ukraine article. There's a few things to throw in here, some that we knew, some maybe not. So Denmark have delivered an unknown number of Marder infantry fighting vehicles over the German IFV, so that's really good news. Storm Shadow cruise missiles have been delivered from Italy. They've announced another package. I presume that's further Storm Shadows to go. 39 LAV, these are big APCs from Canada, have been delivered. So 20 plus YPR 765s. Those are the Dutch upgraded M113 tracked APCs, very old but decent. 5 YPR 806, those are armored recovery vehicles, and 9 plus Fennec armored fighting vehicles. These are Fennec that's Desert Fox, is it not? But anyway, some other armored fighting vehicles from the Netherlands. So the Netherlands, doing an awful lot at the moment. The US and Germany have also delivered an unknown number of these Cheetah self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, so the Gepard, but with the upgraded radar. It's a Dutch upgrade, and a number of these were in Jordan. They bought, I think, up to 60 of them, but don't know how many have actually got to Ukraine presently. Maybe 15, I don't know. And then from the Czech Republic, or Czechia, 5 NBC reconnaissance vehicles. And then we've got some pledged Mirage fighters to be added, of course. 2 AN-32B transport aircraft from, that looks like Croatia there, that flag. And then 200 plus it's Croatia, PBV-302 APCs from Sweden. They're giving all the ones that they have to Ukraine. So just to remind you of some of these vehicles and bits of equipment that have been delivered. Also, someone is saying, what about 70 Senator APC? So these are the Rochelle-made Canadian ones delivered by Czechia. Interesting. I don't see them on the list, and it refers to a letter that was published. Thanks, I didn't see that post before. I've added it to the notes for the next update. So, a few bits and pieces there. Right. Okay. Now, I'm going to have a bit of a whinge. So yesterday, I talked about how the US were not training enough Ukrainian pilots. And this is because they have their set amount of pilots that they have to train from the US Air Force on F-16. Then they've got all the other air pilots from around the world, from other NATO countries, I would have thought, training in the US on F-16s. And actually, it's not like, I need to work an extra 4 hours today, so I'm just going to work it into my evening time and I'll get that extra work done as easy. It's not just like, you can't just order new space for scheduling for F-16 pilots. It's a really difficult thing to work out, and that's what I was trying to say. And also, I was trying to say it's not Biden that's deciding this. So this news piece came out yesterday that the US is deliberately delaying F-16 training and thus application to the battle space. And I was like, I think that's messing around with words there, and I just don't get it. I don't think that Biden is sitting up there going, you're not going to have enough planes, because that's what I want. I want you not to have enough pilots to operate these planes. There's just going to be, right, let's get some training done. Okay, Denmark's doing some, Romania's doing some. We'll try and get some idea and blah, blah, blah. And we can fit 12 in, and that's what we're doing. And then at some point, people realize, well, that's not enough. Now, does that stay in the DoD or the US Air Force or whoever's responsible for the training? Does that get to the National Security Council and Blinken and Jake Sullivan? Does that information ever get to Biden, so that Biden goes, we're not doing enough training, or that we are doing enough and that's it? Does Biden make those kind of decisions about how many individuals the US Air Force can train? No, it's just not in his remit. But anyway, certain people who love to... Now, you can argue that I'm trying to get Biden off the hook here. No, I'm not. I'm trying to just work out who makes the decisions, so that, when you're talking about... Yes, we can blame the correct person. And I know Biden's ultimately responsible, but if he doesn't know about these issues, then things won't get changed. So this idea is where these decisions get made so that we can affect change, right? Not that me sitting here is going to affect any change, but you get the point. But lots of people, so Trent Telenko is also referred to a lot, David D as well, but they are so massively anti-Biden that it's any opportunity to take a pop. And this is this is a kind of message I disagree with, right? Because I just think this is not helpful. So David D, who often takes the opportunity to have a pop at Biden, says this administration, Biden-Sullivan, has always planned to do everything it could to F over Europe and slow roll the F-16s. I don't know that an administration is going to sit there and say, should we give F-16s? Yes, but let's make it as slow as possible. Why? To screw over Ukraine. But haven't we said that we're in this for, but we're just secretly trying to screw over Ukraine. But is that really useful for us? No, it's not useful for us. We want Ukraine to win, obviously, and we want Russia to lose, obviously, because that is not useful that Ukraine gets screwed over. Then why do you want to slow roll F-16s? Just so someone on the internet can get really angry about me. Just like, this makes no sense. Like, just try and be accurate. Yeah, I'm not trying to defend Biden here, but I don't want to just have divisive rhetoric that's not useful. So he says they do not want the F-16 in Europe and will wreck any plan to get them there that they can. We could train 200 pilots in a year to fly them, but are refusing. The French, and again, I'm saying, is that Biden refusing or is that the US Air Force refusing? And I showed you yesterday a claim from John Ridge, who's got, I think, a lot more expertise on the matter than David D here, saying actually this is kind of religiously put in place by the US Air Force. They look after their own training first, and they've only got a certain amount, and it's not very easy to just suddenly develop loads more training capacity. So this will come from the USAF, not from Biden. Anyway, here we've got David D saying the French will have Mirage 2000 pilots trained in 6 months. They have started it. This admin is getting Ukrainians killed with a slow walk of death. And I think there is a slow walking. I think there are decisions. So where there are problems are like not using the ATACMS to strike air bases within Russia. That is a National Security Council, Jake Sullivan thing that should be changed. And I think they should be disabused of those ideas, and I think Biden would just follow along with what the NSC says. But anyway, this I don't think is the same. The admin is getting Ukrainian killed with a slow walk of death, and no, Trump is an effing idiot, but he is not president. This is all Biden. It's his choice to do this. So a couple of people reached out yesterday that I presume have got a little bit of expertise here, saying you need qualified instructors for training. By the time the pilots get to F-16 training, they've already had preparatory training probably for more than a year. Delaying these pilots from completing their training might require them to back up and retrain on what has already been completed. Since it takes years to train a pilot, these slots are planned for in advance. Unless the AF sets up additional training classes, finding qualified instructors for both classroom and actual flight training, I'm not sure this is going to change. In other words, you can't just bump off people and put Ukrainians in there, because that causes a whole issue with the countries that you are supposed to be training, or your own pilots, that then doubly puts that back. Now, John Ridge said about this, he said, actually, they should make extra pilot places for the Ukrainians, even if it does screw over US capabilities, because right now it's more important Ukraine wins than the US doesn't get screwed over in its own pilot training. And I would agree with that, but it's understanding that you can't just suddenly invent new spaces, because instructors are, yes, you can pull some out from retirement, but then you have to get the airframes in for training, then you have to get the classes, you have to, this is a much bigger thing. Training pilots is not like just getting some driving instructors to teach you to drive your car. It's like there's a lot more challenging, I think. And someone else said, concerning the number of pilots that are trained by the US, the Air Force had a hard lesson in the 60s and the 70s losing aircraft on training missions. So they do have a rigorous and bare minimum safe requirements for training that they will not deviate from unless America is directly involved with a war. It's more about ensuring safety of the trainee pilot that takes a lot of money to get them that far, not speaking about the aircraft depending on what stage they're in. So there are all sorts of considerations to have here. The point is that I think it's all Biden's fault. Biden's a loser. He's trying to kill Ukrainians. He's trying on purpose to delay stuff. It just makes no sense to me. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, US Defense spokesperson Pat Ryder's now come out and announced that the potential expansion of the training program for Ukrainian pilots. Of course, now this has happened the day after these guys are slagging off Biden and saying they're trying to wreck it. It's showing that they're not trying to wreck it, because they literally changed it as soon as the criticisms have come through. Like, it's about information getting to the right people, those right people changing policy, and then that policy getting enacted. It's not Biden trying to kill Ukrainians. It just freaking annoys me that. And I will use David D sometimes as some useful nuggets here and there, but like, this is just over politicizing things. Anyway, F-16 training is already underway in Arizona and Denmark, with additional training opportunities being prepared elsewhere in Europe. So Romania is one. So they are looking at this. So General Ryder's words was, so that's really a question that's best addressed by Ukraine. You know, they should be the ones to talk about pilot management in terms of the overall size of their fleet, their overall size of the pilot cadre, and what their expectations are in terms of how they're going to implement that program. Of course, Ukraine have said publicly that they would like more to be trained. Our focus is on working with the Air Capability Coalition to identify what their requirements are and then meeting those requirements. And as you know, training being conducted both in Arizona and Denmark, there's a capacity to conduct additional training training at other locations, that are being prepared in Europe, because again, this will be a long-term proposition in terms of supporting them through the Air Capability Coalition. So, I think it is not as easy as people would imagine it is. Right, moving on from that, F-16 fighter jets that the US will transfer to Kiev will be deployed on the territory of Ukraine. We'll come to that in a second. This is a statement, I think, by Jake Sullivan, actually. Also today, Denmark announced its 19th package for Ukraine. The package is a combination of significant donations for the Ukrainian defense industry, additional materials to support the F-16s that Denmark intends to transfer, and donations from the armed forces' own stockpiles. Not too much detail on that Danish package. It's $170 million package. That's fairly sizable. But yeah, just as mentioned, though, that kind of stuff, equipment for F-16s, being one of the more interesting components of that. Now, in the Jake Sullivan interview, this is Nick Schifrin here, Foreign Affairs and Defence Correspondent for PBS NewsHour, interviewed Jake Sullivan. US agreement with Ukraine allows Ukraine to fire US weapons into Russia across from Sumy. Quote from Sullivan, it extends to anywhere that Russian forces are coming across the border from the Russian side to the Ukrainian side to try to take additional Ukrainian territory. That's happened in Kharkiv. We have seen initial indications that Russia has made exploratory moves across in Sumy, and so it would apply there as well. Now, this is where I think Sullivan is being frickin' weak, right? And this is where you just need to say they can shoot any missiles across the border into Russia. Full freaking stop. ATACMS, anything, shoot at military. You might want to say we're going to constrain US missiles to be used against only military targets. You can argue, I think you would probably be safer to stop Ukraine using American missiles against oil refineries and just assume that Ukraine can use their own missiles and drones to do that. Keep it a little bit safe there and say you can use our missiles into Russia to hit military targets only. And you can use ATACMS, and suddenly those air bases. It's all about the air bases, but he's still afraid of escalating, and I think this is weak here from Sullivan. But, I guess they can use it in Sumy as well officially, but we need that anyway. F-16s will be based inside Ukraine. So, quote, the plan is to put F-16s in Ukraine, and a bilateral security agreement between the US president and Zelensky signed reinforce this point that we want to help Ukraine have this capability. It should be a capability based in Ukraine. Again, which goes back against what David D was saying, because it's actually written into the bilateral security agreement, which, Zelensky was happy with. Why make a 10-year bilateral security agreement commitment that you don't know whether the next president will keep? So, interesting. Quote, in life in general and in democracy in particular, there are never any absolute lock-stock guarantees. Things can change, leaders can change, situations can change. All POTUS can do is set a course and a vision for what it is in the United States national security interest, what is in the interest of the transatlantic alliance, and what is in the interest of our partnership with Ukraine. And that type of approach has historically served America well. And President Biden is going to stick with that approach for as long as he is president of the United States, which he, of course, expects to be for another 4 years. So that pretty much tells you that it can be undone by Trump. On Hamas's latest formal response to the ceasefire, so it goes on to Hamas there. I don't think that we need to go into any of that. So that's the stuff pertinent to Ukraine and an area of shame that the bilateral security agreement can be undone, and also shame that the US hasn't gone far enough with the missiles. Right, now going on to French aid to Ukraine, talking about Jordan Bardella, who is the shining star of the far right of Rassemblement National. Quote from this guide. So remember, Macron has just called a parliamentary election. It's likely that Bardella is going to be the prime minister under President Macron, and there'll be cohabitation between two very different political viewpoints. Now, okay, this is not good. So if you're pro-Ukraine, you don't want Bardella there because Rassemblement National are compromised by Russia. Quote, I do not intend to supply long-range missiles or weapons that could allow Ukraine to attack Russian territory. So that is like, you can't use our weapons into Russian territory. Could be even interpreted that you can't use Scalp EG. During a visit to this place, Eurosatory, the global land and air benchmark event for defense and security held in Paris. The exhibition there, Jordan Bardella reiterated that France must, quote, allow Ukraine to ensure its defense. Okay, so it's like you can defend yourself through arms supplies while rejecting co-belligerence. And of course, this is a really, I think, naive interpretation of what defense is. Like, if you're defending your country, you can't, if you're just going to have to sit there and shoot missiles as you fly into your country, then you are unable to defend your country adequately. You need to be able to shoot the missile down earlier, if possible. So that's as it's flying in Russia, or preferably shoot the plane down, or even better, shoot the base where those missile carrying planes take off from. If you're saying you can defend your country, but you can't do any of those things apart from shoot the missile down once it's in your territory, then you are tying the hands of the Ukrainians behind their backs. That is not, defense goes towards attacking Russian air bases. That is a form of defense. Just absolutely ridiculous that Bardella here would be making this kind of statement. And it's exactly where the US kind of were before they allowed the US weapons to be shot into Russia. And the US has budged there, and we've got Jordan Bardella not budging. Ukraine must have, quote, everything it needs to hold the front. So it can only hold the front. It can't get its stuff back. To hold the front, both in terms of ammunition and material, but he feels red line will not change, referring to, quote, the sending of material that could have escalatory consequences in Eastern Europe. This is freaking Russian appeasement from Bardella. This is why Rassemblement National should not win. They must not win, but they will no doubt have a huge success. It depends. There are coalitions forming, but it's not looking good for French support for Ukraine going forward. And that's a real challenge, because France are massive inside Europe as driving the narrative. Right, Blinken said the US will do everything possible to ensure that North Korea and Iran stop supplying weapons to Russia. That's great. There needs to be a ramping up of whatever can be ramped up against Iran and North Korea, but it's not like you can sanction North Korea anymore. In Russian electronic warfare, successfully jamming the GPS signals on American-provided precision-guided munitions to the point that Ukraine can no longer effectively employ them. Is Russia doing that? And Colby Badwell has a thread here that we're going to go through quickly. No, it's not. Many people seem to believe it is, though. So what's really going on? Okay. Electronic warfare jamming of American equipment. Okay, a lot of public discourse around Russian EW, electronic warfare, has focused on their efforts at GPS interference and denial. This has arguably been a successful Russian info operation. Lost in the conversation is that the most vulnerable systems to EW are commercial off-the-shelf ones. These include non-military grade communications and commercial drones. A RUSI report, Royal United Services Institute report from May 2023 found that Russian EW was jamming Ukrainian comms over Motorola's with a 256-bit encryption, and was also downing 10,000 Ukrainian drones per month. These are significant problems that require more attention. While the low cost of COTS, commercial off-the-shelf, stuff you can buy, off the internet or whatever, FPV drones may still make them cost-effective, delivering military-grade communications with aerial drones and with electronic warfare, resiliency should still be a high priority. Now, so basically, you can jam these drones, but actually, since they're so much cheaper, you can buy more of them to overcome that. But you need to be working on electronic warfare resiliency on your kind of military grade drones, really. GPS guided. So now we're going on to talk about GPS guided munitions. So GPS guided munitions are not equally impacted. Some are completely compromised. Others are degraded but still effective, especially with countermeasures, and others remain largely unaffected. The Russians do learn, so this is an ever-evolving challenge. On one end of the spectrum, the M982 Excalibur 155mm guided artillery shell, I talked about that this morning, initially enjoyed a 70% effective rate. So 70% of these hit their targets. Russian adaptations to their GPS jamming efforts were successful in reducing that to just 6%, though. Consequentially, Ukraine largely abandoned using them, although today I noticed that 3 were on the loss list as a result, as causes for Russian losses. Per US Department of Defense figures, Ukraine was only provided with 7,000 of those rounds, though, with the last commitment in April 2023. So Ukraine was able to use them for about a year, and their employment has tapered off due to the limited stocks and the GPS denial. The impact of electronic warfare on GMLRS was first, so guided multiple launch rocket systems, was first reported back in May 2023. Fresh documentation of Ukrainian GMLRS fire missions has continued since then, though, so it clearly has not been rendered ineffective. Electronic warfare impacts have been mitigated by allocating additional missiles for each target. So again, a bit like the cheap drones, although these aren't cheap missiles, just send more missiles and you're able to get some of them through. It's obviously not very efficient, not very cost effective, or at least not as cost effective as having resilience in the missiles. Reports of JDAM-ER being impacted by electronic warfare also, so these are dumb munitions with glide kits dropped from airframes, from aircraft that glide and have precision using GPS. But there was talk about them being jammed successfully. So the JDAM-ER being impacted by electronic warfare also first emerged last spring. As with GMLRS, revised mission planning and continuous software patches from the manufacturers mitigate these impacts. JDAM-ER has maintained a 60% average effective rate for most of 2023 as a result. So that's not bad, 60%. I mean, you would like it better, but it's not as bad as, say, 6% of Excalibur rounds. Ground-launched small diameter bombs, these are ones fired out of rockets, so similar to the dumb munition being given a glide kit for dropping. These are cheaper munitions being given a glide kit and precision capabilities for firing out of a guided multiple launch rocket like a HIMARS system. So they have been one of the failures, both due to electronic warfare and other unspecified issues. Boeing is working on resolving the electronic warfare vulnerability, though this will take months. It may yet prove to be useful in the future, but right now it's a lesson learned. Unlike its ground-launched derivative, unmodified GBU-39B small diameter bombs, SDBs, have apparently been 90% effective. This may degrade over time as the Russians make their own improvements to their electronic warfare tactics, but so far it's been a very useful addition. The arrival of F-16s has the potential to improve Ukraine's resiliency to Russian electronic warfare and improve their counter-electronic warfare capabilities. So this is a really important point. The Department of Defense has already contracted the delivery of home-on GPS jam seekers to be integrated on Ukraine's JDAM-ERs. So the JDAM-ERs themselves, these guided glide bombs that have extended range, will have anti. When the F-16s come along, will have anti-jamming home-on GPS jam seekers to be integrated with them. So yeah, I presume that manages to jam the jammer, so to speak. This threat, so while Russia does have an electronic warfare advantage, Ukraine has significant capabilities of their own. The details around this are heavily guarded, though, so my writing was only based on open source information. Don't take it as a comprehensive overview of the electronic warfare battle space. The fight over the electromagnetic spectrum is very complex. So all of it's not been covered by him. Finally, I'll remind people that I don't get to write the headlines. No single system, including F-16s, has the potential to give Ukraine an advantage in electronic warfare. It's a rapidly evolving fight, and no advantage that either side has will be permanent. And that is referring to the title of his piece there. So just about those seekers on the JDAM-ER. So the US Air Force has awarded, says John Ridge, a $23.554 million contract to Scientific Applications and Research Associates for the procurement of home-on GPS jam seekers to support in support of a foreign military sale to Ukraine. These seekers will be installed on Ukrainian JDAM-ER glide bombs. So that is good news there. Okay, right. Breaking again, Colby Badwa here. Breaking. Swiss media have reported that the US will divert Switzerland's pending foreign military sales order of PAC-3 MSE missiles to Ukraine and then fulfill the contract later. So this is really good news. This is what Biden talked about previously at G7, where he said that basically the Patriot missile systems, and one presumes missiles as well, will be prioritized for Ukraine in their manufacturing. And if you are on the list of countries, if you're one of the countries that is waiting for a fulfilled contract, you'll have to wait longer. So it's really good news that Ukraine is being prioritized. So Switzerland received approval for the purchase of 72 of these PAC-3 missiles, ones that can take ballistic missiles out, in November 2022, and signed a $330 million letter of offer of acceptance in October 2023. Delivery of these missiles is not scheduled until 2028 or 2029, though. So I don't see why the Biden administration would even take this course of action. It proves no assistance to Ukraine in the short term. But so interesting. It's one of these ones, an order that's well down the list, but they've been told that they're going to be moved back. But I presume it just means that they are getting prepared to do this with lots of countries as they make missiles for Ukraine. As Badwar says, the modification or cancellation of a foreign military sales contract by the executive is a risky move. While the standard LOA template does provide for the ability to take this step, customers can seek to amend those terms during the negotiation process. It's unknowable whether Switzerland has done so, but the media report also implies that this may be a fait accompli. Furthermore, the existence of offset agreements, local work share for companies in the customer country between the prime contractor and the customer, add additional complications to any possible modification or cancellation. In other words, if you are one of the countries that actually has some of the building of that missile or weapon system in your country, if you are put further down the list, then there's a complication there saying, well, we're doing this to build stuff for us, and now you're saying our people will have to build stuff for Ukraine, and that's, it's just more complicated. Switzerland routinely requests and negotiates such offset agreements on their FMS cases. Their Patriot battery case does have a significant offset agreement. It is unclear if the MSE case does as well. Ultimately, even if it is legally feasible to modify or cancel, it is never a good idea. It undermines the credibility of the foreign military sales program to take such measures, especially if it is to prioritize another customer rather than for the US's own needs. This is something that needs to be confirmed by US officials as soon as possible, as it poses significant risk to the US without any clear immediate benefit to Ukraine or the US. I'm presuming they are probably pushing everyone down the list, and Switzerland's one further on the list. That's what we know about, but there may be other things going on with other countries, hopefully, that sees the prioritization of both the missiles themselves, the ordnance, and the systems. Right, staying on Switzerland, there has been a claim that Switzerland wants to be able to supply weapons to Ukraine indirectly. Specifically, countries such as Germany, Denmark, and Spain will be able to supply military equipment to Ukraine. This is something that's been talked about an awful lot for a very long time, and there have been previous votes on this, and it hasn't quite worked out. The Security Policy Committee took the decision just 3 days after the conference of the Ukraine in Bergenstock. The majority of the committee wants to change the current law, which prevents such re-exports, explained committee chairwoman Priska Sela-Graf at the press conference. A bill to this effect will soon be submitted to the National Council. Re-export to a country at war must be possible if it exercises its right to self-defense. The UN Security Council must have established a violation of the prohibition of the use of force. If it is blocked, the original purchasing country must certify that the right of self-defense on the basis of its analysis of international law. Purchasing countries will still have to sign a 5-year non-export declaration. Re-exports will only be possible for countries that do not violate human rights and do not use weapons against civilians. The new rule will apply retroactively. The idea is to help Ukraine, but not only Ukraine, which is really good news, and that would allow Ukraine to get hold of an awful lot of ammunition, one would think, as well as other equipment, but it's not going to happen overnight, right? So indirect supply of weapons, Switzerland, it will be at least another year before the Swiss Parliament votes on this change in the law. Now we only have a decision or recommendation from the Security Policy Commission. So it's a long way off still, but it's a move in the right direction. Right, Northrop Grumman will establish a co-production of medium caliber ammunition in Ukraine, financed by Ukrainian funds. This was disclosed by the spokesman themselves, or no, the director actually. So that's medium caliber, that's 30mm, 40mm, 50mm. So that's going to be produced in Ukraine. That's good news. I mean, you can imagine things, that's a sort of Gepard size munition by the looks of it. Bradley's 30mm autocannon, but also 40 and 50mm. But they are looking to expand production in the future to include tank and 155mm artillery ammunition. So this is really good news for Ukraine. The first publicly confirmed co-production deal between a US firm and Ukraine. It was previously reported that General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems was one of 2 US firms that were planning to establish 155mm production in Ukraine. But no details have yet confirmed that. And the director was also interested in DoD contracts for 155mm production, but wanted to produce their own design rather than the US Army's current M795 or M1128. This may refer to their proposed 155mm shell with an integrated precision guidance kit. So there you go. If that can be produced in Ukraine and is useful for Ukraine, even better. Really good news there, because Ukraine need as much artillery ammunition as they can get. And speaking of which, Singapore Technologies Engineering has been awarded several contracts worth more than $100 million in total for the supply of 155mm and 40mm shells to unnamed European countries. So Singapore possibly getting in on the production there of ammunition for Ukraine through third countries. Right, now in terms of mobilization, state border guards discovered 5 men in a boat sailing across the Tisza River to Hungary. The men paid dealers from $7,000 to $10,000 for the organization of the crossing. Wow. That's a lot of money. That's how desperate some people are to escape the war. So that issue still remains for both sides. Russia doesn't make the machine tools it needs to ramp up its defense industry. Maybe they should get hold of Keir Starmer's dad. He'll be able to help. So the Kremlin's buyers are scouring China for second-hand ones using shadowy networks and sourcing vital kit from Western manufacturers. Wow! So this has been talked about quite a bit. How the Russians are needing some of that capital in order to manufacture what they need to, and sanctions are causing issues. So they're getting second-hand ones off China. Men in camouflage and with machine guns blocked a market in Yekaterinburg. So that's pretty much a third city of Russia. Civilians were not allowed out and sellers were kicked out their stalls. One of the markets is blocked by unknown armed people. They are dressed in camouflage and their faces hidden under masks. There is no official information about what happened yet. People in uniform do not take active action and simply hold the entrances and exits. The reason for their visit is not yet known. That's Russian media. Now, I would wonder whether you've got another example of going in and getting picking people up for mobilization is certainly one issue, unless there's something going on with a terrorist incident there. But they're doing that quite a bit, I think. Fighter bomber. So this is a Russian pilot who is quite a reliable source on what's going on with aircraft in Russia, or with the Russians, is complaining about low supply of new Su-34s. So 2 days ago, the UAC delivered the first batch of Su-34s this year to the troops. This is definitely great news. The number of aircraft in the batch is not indicated, but we can safely say that there were 2 aircraft in it. Thus, in more than 6 months, 2 new Su-34 were made. And we have at least 2 known non-combat losses of the Su-34s since May of this year. I really want to believe and hope that the manifold increase in aircraft production announced last year is not 2 Su-34s in 6 months, and we will now see transferred batches of aircraft at least monthly, or at least quarterly, or at most quarterly. People from the audience correct me that this is the second batch in a year. The first was in early April, thus 2 more, although it's not clear whether the planes were new or restored. But this does not change the essence. It is too little. So it's good to know what the manufacturing, what the production output for these jets is. I mean, you'd hope that with the F-16s coming online as well, that the Russians might lose some more of these planes, especially with the air defense being so degraded across the occupied territories, that the use of these planes is more challenging for the Russians, and they might lose some more. We haven't seen the loss of some in a few weeks now, but 2 in 6 months, Su-34s is obviously not enough. for Russia. Russia and North Korea have signed a strategic partnership agreement. Russian President Putin and Kim Jong-un, who are hanging out together in Pyongyang, have signed this partnership. And under the treaty, the two countries pledged to provide aid to one another if either is attacked, Putin said at a press conference after the signing ceremony. This is in response to, 16 or so countries have now signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine. Russia's answer to that is going and signing one with North Korea. And this shows you what mates Russia has. And I find it unlikely that any other country would sign such a forthright agreement with Putin, meaning that, if Russia was attacked, they would legally have to come to the defense of Russia. I think that's too high a risk for anyone other than someone like North Korea. So, yeah, interesting that it's got to that level for Putin. Things are desperate. He needs North Korea so much at the moment. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. Speak soon.